Welcome back, Kent Adams. Glad to have a representative from McNeice Wheeler, and this is Alison Erickson.
Yep.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Now I'm going to ask you to play the guitar and sing.
I mean, it's not my specialty.
But you do it?
For sure. I don't.
Oh, okay.
I don't.
Okay, I thought, well, maybe you really do.
I don't think I've ever really picked up a guitar in my life. So.
Okay, not to chase somebody and hit him over the head or anything, huh?
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe.
All right. Excuse me. We're going to talk about family law what's going on. And Washington, as you know, is a community property state. But what does that mean?
What that means is in Washington, there is a presumption that any property you and your spouse acquired during marriage is community property, so it belongs to both of you.
Now, the key there was in the marriage.
Correct.
Right?
Yep. So what I mean by it's a presumption is that there is property that can be acquired prior to marriage or with separate property funds that can still be deemed separate property. So one example of that we see a lot is maybe an inheritance or things like that. Even if that's acquired during marriage, that's still going to be categorized as separate property.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yes.
So like if the inheritance from my mom and dad kind of thing.
Correct, and it can be in the form of an actual item, and then that's going to maintain its separate property characteristic. But a lot of times we see actual funds that are acquired, and then that can actually become community property if you commingle it with other community property.
Okay.
So that's kind of where the distinction lies and where you can run into some issues when we go back and try and actually determine whether or not what the categorization of that property is. So if you inherit a sum of money, say, you stick it in a community bank account and you've got money going in and out, then you've essentially commingled
It's assumed to be joint at that point.
Correct. You've made it into community property. If, however, you can trace it back to that community or that separate property source, then it can maintain its separate property nature.
Even if I've commingled?
Once you've commingled, you've commingled.
It's done. Okay,
yes.
okay.
Yes. And by commingled, I mean that it can no longer be traced back to the separate property source.
Okay. All right. Wow, that's why we need attorneys, right? To keep track of all this, because there are so many. Thank goodness, right?
Correct.
For you, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so when do properties cease being community properties?
So once someone actually files for divorce, that's going to stop the accumulation of community property and the accumulation of community debts.
Okay.
So
once you file.
Once you file, so not once you finalize. So in Washington, there's that 90-day waiting period. You cannot file you cannot finalize any sooner than that 90 days, and that's just by statute. As soon as you go in and actually file your initial petition for divorce, there's not going to be any accumulation of community property or community debts at that point.
Oh, okay. Wow. Yeah. Even if it's a simple divorce and so forth, you still have to wait the 90 days then.
Yes, you do. And we see that a lot where people kind of are like, well, we already know, we've already come to an agreement on everything we want.
Everything is good.
We're not arguing over anything, and it's just, unfortunately, there is that requirement that you can't finalize.
So probably not best that you go out and get married again in that 90-day period.
No, because you don't have a decree of divorce until that 90 days is up.
I think it's called bigamy, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
We don't want that. No.
No, that probably is not a good thing. Then you have a whole bunch of legal issues to resolve.
For sure. Some criminal issues potentially.
Well, okay. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. What does this whole process mean in terms of debts that you and I are married and now we're going to divorce? How does that affect the debts that we've accumulated over the years?
So a lot of people, when they come in, they think of divorce and they think about splitting up their stuff, their money, items that they've acquired, but it goes for debts as well. So any debts you've acquired during your marriage are community debts. So you have to split those up and determine, who's going to take which debt, how you want to split each debt.
Because it's best to take one and I take the other and that kind of thing. Otherwise, if we're both paying on one and you don't pay, there could be problems, right?
Right.
So we need to separate those.
Yeah, and there's definitely usually a hold harmless provision in the final decree, but it can certainly cause you a headache if a debt that the two of you took out and was awarded to a spouse to pay, and that person defaults, and then they come after you. So you definitely want to protect yourself in that regard. Student loans are something we see. If those were taken out during the marriage, they're going to be presumed to be community debt, even though they're probably only in one person's name.
Right.
There are certain arguments to be made on
So
both
you
sides.
outline those in the decree and
Yep.
and-
You have to be very specific about those. So usually when we're talking about, say, a credit card debt or something like that, we want the last four digits of the account number, the amount of the debt, who's going to be paying on the debt, things
Right.
like that.
Okay, so those are all spelled out
Yes.
as you sign the decree and so forth.
You certainly want to be as specific as possible just to sort of protect
So no
both
surprises
spouses.
later
Yeah.
on,
Yep.
because
And make
otherwise
sure-
you're mounting the bill for an attorney to
Yeah.
go back and update things. I
and
would
make sure
assume.
that all debts are actually disclosed, because if there's a debt that you don't know about, it's not accounted for in a decree, so that's kind of where there might be a little bit
Yeah,
of
what happens
discovery.
with that? If we've honestly forgotten something,
Well, it's usually not necessarily a matter of forgetting. Maybe it's just,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I
a
thought you
matter-
might go there, yeah.
Yeah, one spouse maybe opened a credit card during the marriage, didn't disclose it, so you run into it at that point, and then you'd have to go back and make sure you take care of who's going to be paying on that.
okay, so that's back in and it goes through the court to,
It can. It
okay.
can. You know,
Otherwise
if,
signed off.
yeah, I think there would be ways to deal with that outside of court, specifically if there was a situation in which one spouse just intentionally didn't disclose a debt.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Whew, okay, lots of questions.
Yeah.
Do you deal with this all the time? I'm
I
going to
do.
guess.
I deal with this a lot. I mean, I do other areas of practice as well,
Right.
but I do family law quite a bit.
Wow, that's a whole specialty, isn't it?
It really can be. Yeah, it's kind of its own animal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A monster sometimes,
yeah.
I'll bet.
Yeah, it can be.
So if people want to get in touch with you, Alison, how do they do that?
They can give our office a call, 928-4141. Or they can kind of shoot us an email, info@McNeiceWheeler.com,
Okay.
Alison@McNeiceWheeler.com. They can go ahead and get a hold of me.
Great, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll come back with a song with I almost said Sam, with Zach Haval right after this.
I'm Barbara Mueller.
And I'm Marty Mueller. We have gotten some amazing opportunities to design and build IMAX cameras that were going to go on the space station. We came up with a mechanism that we poured a year into, and we had to start over. The failure resulted in a camera that we got an Academy Award for.
The first shot, when you see Earth from our camera, there is no other moment like it.
Wouldn't have happened without that failure.
So how do you give a kid or even an adult the skills to go forward? The only alternative is to teach them to think, to teach them to explore, take risks, and know that they're going to fall, and they're going to fall on their next great idea.
Gizmo's a makerspace, which is a community laboratory for education and fun.
The cooperation amongst people is the most important thing that we have. And STCU is doing that, and I hope that we're doing that too.
STCU.
Here for good.